So this is a great piece. I think it was, yes, Antares. And I ignored him for so long. I'm so sorry. It's just that I don't check Facebook messages as much. I check Facebook messages. I don't check the wall messages. But let's get started. What the first thing that pops out is this like kind of inhuman. I'm gonna get fix the ears in a sec, but this kind of like it's like unfamiliar. This little bump on either side. What I'm used to seeing is like a basic, really rounded geometry for the shape of the skull. Pretty much nice and out of the way. And the neck itself feels very thin. So considering where the jawline is, typically where we place the neck is as soon as we hit the corner of the jawline right here, a couple paces after that, I guess I could say, is where the neck starts. The neck will feel extremely sick, like a sick person's neck. I don't know if you've ever seen what happens to the body, how it transforms with anorexia, but typically the neck ends up being really thin, and the jawline almost looks masculine. They start to take on, the female anorexic patients start to take on a more masculine proportion. It's really strange seeing that much mass in the jawline. It's not that the skeleton has changed, there's no fat to round off the face and to make the face that triangular proportion in it, so to bring that proportion into the face. So before, after, it's that really thin neck that gives off the feeling of like that anorexic or completely no fat is around kind of thing. So I'm going to erase the corrections I did on the ears and bring the old ears back, but that's the first thing that popped out, and that should have been something someone mentioned in your critiques. Should have been very visible, but it's a little less now. You want to reserve this kind of proportion for like a Voldemort. Like, I don't know if you guys observed this, but Voldemort had that sickly skeletal look. So we talked about villains a while ago, and what we covered is that this typically the more like a skeleton, or the more influence the skull, the human skull, the bare human skull has on the design or the portrait design of the villain, the more effect it will have to make the villain more read better. It will make them more villain-like. It'll make them hateable. It'll cross over, bring in the factor of death, theme of death, and help you translate that villainness to them. But characters that are basic beauty, you want to avoid that villain silhouette, and that's basically what I'm seeing here. Is it almost no fat on the skeleton skull? Okay, so the eyes feel a little bit spaced out, and I think it's two-parter. I have to merge this back down. The eyes seem spaced out because they don't seem to cross towards a concentration or a focus. So typically what we do is we cross them. So when we want to make them look like they're looking at something, we bring them closer together, we cross them so they look like they're looking at an object in the foreground. That crossness, when you look at a portrait, when you meet someone, you look at their eyes. So when you're looking at a portrait, you're meeting the portrait, the character. And so typically what we look for is that gaze. If they're spaced out, it feels very disconnected. A lot isn't involved in the eyes. What I'm going to do next is raise the density on the brush settings and just shrink the eyes. So another reason why this character looked just a little bit anorexic is because her skull shrunk around her eyes, and her eyes felt like they were, so this is a bit too much. Her eyes felt like they were, part of that, like the head was so small that it made the eyes look big. But if we shrink the eyes, it'll look like there's mass to the face, to the head, that there's fat there. I'm going to just fix that. Maybe I'll leave the eyebrows as is. I'm also going to increase the size of the nose. So typically you do want to have a smaller nose for a female, but you don't want it to look like an adolescent or prepubescent nose. So I don't want to shrink the whole or enlarge the whole snout, just the nose. And what we're doing here is, again, it's just trying to bring that space in between the eyes back. So before, after. It's that alien-like proportion that just won't do if you're going for a universal look that you want to learn and have that staple look. You call upon it whenever you have a book cover design or a character design. You want to work from realistic proportions. So I'm not saying draw the same old Barbie face and the same eyebrows and the same kinds of eyes. I'm saying stick to one proportion for a while, because the read is much more realistic. So realistic isn't just in the shading, it's also in the proportions and the measuring and the scale. So this one, there's actually a disease that makes your eyes look like this. I think it's Graves' disease. It makes your eyes pop out. It's like a hyperthyroidism disease. So it's I was just reading that because I was researching a lot of thyroid stuff earlier. That popped out look, and especially because the head was so small, it felt like her head was being squeezed. And after we just relaxed the proportions back, and that's why I felt that adolescent kind of prepubescent proportion to her face, even though her eyebrows and her cheekbones were suggesting a developed post puberty, like an adult beauty, like a full woman. We were reading like, smaller, like large head, small shoulders, big eyes, baby features. So we're mixing two ages together. So she still looks gorgeous, but she doesn't have that a little bit over the edge, a little bit entering that unfamiliar, the uncanny. And the uncanny happens in so many ways. It happens with mixing age, it happens with mixing gender, it happens with mixing proportions, it happens with mixing expression. The uncanny is just whatever's supposed to be familiar but feels unfamiliar at the same time. Something about it is super familiar, but the proportions are just all off. Okay. So what else would I change? The edges of her lips are just dots. They don't progress radially into the flesh. Really what the corners of your lips aren't like nasal cavities, so they are part of the 6 dark spots, but they're not a dark spot. They're a gradual little black hole of descent, like it's the leftovers of the black hole of the mouth as it's closed. I know that's a weird way of thinking about it, but think of it as like a whirlpool of flesh, and slowly you get darker and darker. So what we're trying to do is we're trying not to just leave a dot there and expect that dot to sculpt. That's not what that dot's going to do. It's just going to be a dot. So don't use dots instead of like actual describe the cavity. The point is the description. That's the key word. We're describing that slow radial movement down to the darkest point of the eye. These little bits right now, that this L shape, this is a really good way to connect the eyes. A lot of students don't know how to connect the eyes into the temple, and what we usually do is just promote this L shape right here. Then it just helps you combine the eyes with the skeletal structure and the skull around it. But this right here, this sharp line, this doesn't happen in the real world. It's more gradual. This is not a severe edge, so we reserve these kinds of edges for when we have an actual angle. So if there's like a measurable angle right over here. So when we have edges, there's 2 ways we can have edges. This is a fundamental, so write it down. When we have super sharp, unforgiving edges is when we have one object in the way of another object. This is one way to have an edge. This object's shade and this object never blend. There's space, there's distance in between them. They don't merge at any point in time. So this does happen on the face with the nostrils, the edge of the head and the background. This is background, this is foreground, this is foreground, this is background. So they don't merge, we don't blend it. That's one way to have an edge. Another way to have an edge is to have a sharp angle. So when we have one surface area that is completely perpendicular or close to perpendicular to another area beside it. So we have this angle looking this way, this angle looking this way, and this perpendicular. So these 2 vectors describe that this face and this face don't look in the same direction. They look in different directions. So what you're telling me is that this surface and this surface are completely different edges, that they deserve this super sharp edge. This is wrong. This is stylistic. This does happen in the real world, but only with makeup. So if we look at that like a tape technique, they use this tape technique, makeup, images, So they use like a piece of tape to make that super sharp line happen. But that sharp line isn't in the basic no makeup structure, like the actual core structure of the skeleton. So I mean, we don't have a super edge. We have something like an edge. This does protrude. The eye socket bone does stick out, but it doesn't stick out like this unless there was makeup. So make sure if you do have this here, you know that you're using makeup right now, that she has some kind of makeup wing, very subtle but sharp. Tape technique used makeup wing. But if you want that natural look, which I recommend you do learn, you have to blend this away. Make it look like a gradual hill. So you have to think about contour lines. Does it do this or does it do this? And if it does this, then these indicate that you have to start using gradual tones. This is a gradation, a gradual tone, a gradient. Okay. So when you draw these, or if you don't draw these, it becomes very obvious. You don't think about these. This mesh, this general grid line that sits on top of everything. If you don't think about these, then it becomes very obvious around your work that you're not thinking about the mesh and how the horizontal and vertical, like longitude and latitude lines, describe what's really happening with angles, whether or not angles really are that perpendicular, how it feels to actually hold the face. And if you don't have a sculpture at hand, use your own face. It'll really help get that realistic feeling. So before, after, and really that's what's going to push you. That's what's going to get you to that next level, is these final little corrections. And the more you improve, I mean, where you started off is amazing. The more you improve, the harder it is to improve. That's how it works. It's very easy to see a jump between beginner to intermediate, and even better to see a beginner to advanced after a year, but advanced to slightly more advanced, there's not going to be much of a jump. And if you find that your work is lacking that thing that's always there, and it's like this cancerous thing that's holding your work back, it's usually in the details. Like this, it's usually that. It's very, very elusive little change. So another thing that we don't want to do is share value words. So this is another indication that you're thinking makeup, or maybe you don't know you're thinking makeup. Sorry guys, 1 second. Okay, thought I was going to sneeze, but it didn't happen. So right here you have the same value all around, or a very, very similar value. Typically this inner part here is not as dark. It's actually pretty light. The severity of that angle happens out here. So we do have remember that angle I was showing you over here? This does happen here because this eyeball is a separate geometry from the skull around it. So it's just actually sticks out under all that flesh. And we got to get rid of that excess shadow, because right now you don't know it, but you're outlining the eye. And when I take it out, there's no form left, is there? I know, and that's the indication that you weren't sure exactly what to do with the lower eyelid. So what you do that one episode from Friends, what I do what we do is we lay some of that lash line here, scatter some indication that there is a lash line. I mean, why would we have all this lash over here and none of it down here? Be careful when using references with makeup. Makeup is like everything you think you know about sculpting will be just destroyed by makeup. Makeup is like false eyeshadow, like it's false shadows. It's artificial shading that makes the eye look bigger than it really is. So you don't know, but you're drawing the wrong kind of eye, or not an eye that feels realistic. And I'm going to bring in a spike, a really light value to represent the spike that happens in the specular of the waterline. And that's something you were missing because you used an outline. Yep, yeah. I know you didn't use an outline. There was no line to be seen, but it was a really thick, fuzzy, really, really tricky little outline that you did use. And when we do that, and then we bring in our edge brush, and we create that nice edge that we are supposed to have right here along the sides. Then the eye will start to read realistically. We won't have that falseness to them, that fakeness, that outlined look. Even then, because the the outline was there, the waterline is actually sagging. I would move it all upward a little bit, but this is all I can do. Maybe I can actually move the outline upward. No, I don't know. It's too much work. Gonna just outline that. Blend that. So before, after, see that extra shadow you used on the inside? That's a form of outline. That's a form of excessive dependency on makeup. You can keep the old eye size, like the old, they were unfocused. They weren't focused. You can keep the old pupil size. You can keep that. It'll still look pretty, but you can't have that big ballooned eye size. It'll look too extreme. So you can shrink them, or you can keep them. There's one reason why she's starting to look old, and that's because the eye is sagged. The lower eyelid sags with older eyes. So the best way to fix that is to just raise them. It's very, very simple. And it's starting to look old because the outline was hiding the fact that you didn't have enough for the waterline, enough space for the waterline, and that outline was really hiding a lot of errors. She's starting to look a little younger, but you see what I mean by old. When you're old and you use lots of Botox and that shit, your eyelids sag down, and that definitely happens. So we brought in more realistic, more realistic proportions. What I would do is create an edge right here between the highlight of that lower eyelid. This is another edge that does happen because this area is so shiny and so oily. I'll go back and lower this degree. I just need that edge. And this goes all the way down here. Just get my soft brush, undarken. Just take that down a couple degrees. Just want the edge. Sorry, I'm not looking at the comments. Can anyone summarize what I did with this character real quick? Not even sure if Antares is here. Wouldn't it be like really sad if he finally gets the critique and Is your real name Antares, by the way? Did your parents really name you after a star? That really just pushed the cheekbones higher. Face looks too long. Made it look less makeup-y. Yeah. Some people have long faces. I don't have a problem with the long face at all. Some people do have long faces. I'm not trying to change the face he made. I'm trying to bring in an alternative, more realistic, less, I guess, anime-influenced face. 'Cause that neck width was really, so you had two options. Either shrink the face to match the head you made, or enlarge the head to fit the face you drew. But either way, the face was too big for the head. So what I did was shrink the face within the head and enlarge the head just a little bit. Correcting proportions. I think he's not here. He isn't. Oh. I hate Dayquil. Do you guys get that? Like you take Dayquil and then like midday you just start tasting Dayquil again. It like enters your bloodstream and everything just tastes like Dayquil. I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. So this piece right here, I just wanted to show you, if you ever try to switch this into color, you will have a muddy mess. The only way she's this dark and this light all at the same time is if the room was really, really dark and she had nothing but a candle, naught but a candle by her side. So the background would really have to be... Alright, no. Okay. Okay. Damn, I have no patience. Alright. Okay, motherfucker. Alright, go down. If the background was this dark, like the room was dark and there's like a soft light nearby somehow. It was like a really, really soft light, like a dark room, midday, but really, really dark curtains. Probably something like this would happen. But because your light environment is indicating a light environment, then it would be, you would have to be much lighter around here. So what you did with the nose is beautiful. What you did with the eyes is just beautiful. What you really need to do now is just lighten. This will all look muddy and old. She will look old. She does read as old right now, especially because you've over contrasted. But I think what you need to do is raise the values up. Normal. And the darkest points would just be out here. And that's if the room was dark enough. And this still is really, really dark. Still feels extremely dark. So it could be that she's in a room with not that dark a curtain and the sunlight shining through, because what you've chosen to surround the image. A lot of you forget that you're supposed to actually, include this into your calculations. The background is supposed to be included in your calculations, and the color of the background makes or breaks the image, really. Your lighting setup, your light environment is a three-parter: the object, the light source, and the background. Only things that are supposed to be dark are dark spots. But what you had before was extremely muddy. And yeah, I used a soft brush to correct it. I don't have time to go in there and fix everything, but I mean, I can darken this back. Oops. Because it's a dark spot, so that's okay. She looks like she's wearing really, really dark lipstick, by the way. But this, if you try to make this into color, you'll have a really, really hard time. Or at least these values here. Okay. I mean, she might have accidentally waxed them off. Oh my god, you guys are terrible. This brow talk needs to stop. Oh my god, where are my moderators? You guys, you're not supposed to talk outside of the topic. I mean, why are we talking about missing eyebrows? I'm trying to talk about a serious matter here. You guys want to be banned? Where are my moderators? Where are you? You're supposed to stop this kind of... Alright, that's enough. That's enough. That's enough eyebrow talk. I think one must train to use hard brushes in order to understand color and light. Yeah. Do you guys use a hard brush for details on the eyes, such as the eyelid, or a soft brush? I usually use a hard brush. I like to have those really, really sharp edges. They're really important for detail when we're drawing. So I'm not going to talk about proportion. I just wanted to cover that. If you ever did want to move into color, this is not accurate. This would not work. Alright. So for this piece, I think one of your biggest issues is, I mean, the nose looks great, but you have this grit, this detail that's happening with everything that's making this look really busy, and not just that, it feels congested. The canvas is a little bit small for her, for the whole setup, and what I would do is I would leave all that excessive detail. Only for the eyes, and not just the eyes, well, not only for the eyes, like, only eyes. Even the eyebrows aren't allowed. Totally just crashed that sentence into a light pole. I need to call my insurance company for that sentence. that crash that just happened. So you need to bring down this tiny little 1 pixel width brush detailing that's happening with the brows. You need to bring that down all the way. You need to bring down this excessive detail out here because, sorry if you hear thumping, that my neighbors on the other side are moving in to like a box of an apartment. It's a pillbox. The apartment beside me on the other side is like it's the size of my bathroom. It is so tiny. I don't know how anyone could live in it. I guess a student could live in it for like 3 months, but I don't know what I'm saying. So I'm just bringing down this detail out here, and what that's going to do is reassert the focus over here. I'm going to kind of blur the edge of this cheek. I don't need extra little super detail there. This detail you have here, these brush strokes, are not even painterly brush strokes anymore. They're just tiny little grains that are causing a lot of disruption. All these tiny little 1 pixel width brushes leading all the way to the edge of the canvas are drawing my eye out of the canvas. And what I'm doing is I'm blurring them out so she stays the focus. Fatty edges of a face can be very, very blurry, so I'm going to blur that. And you see, if you look only at her eyes, it doesn't really bother you that I just blurred out nearly like, I don't know, like 30% of the 40% of the detail away. And anything that hits an edge cannot be detailed. It simply cannot, and the image won't suffer for it either. Next step would be just to fix these geometries here. I mean, they have a really, really flat face happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken half her face as if it was a beard and then erase away only where there are light spots. So the chin, the lip. But this shadow is really important. There's a lot of stuff blanketing around her face. Choose some like a warm color and then throw it on the edges of the canvas. Again, just to make it feel less congested. Not everything is trying to be the focal point. Just like that. And for the eyebrows, if you want to bring detail back, you don't want them to get fuzzy like this, all you really have to do is just some really wide brush strokes. And you'll bring some detail back, but you don't want to overdo it either. Your dark spot here is a little bit missing. The presence of the light source is almost non-existent. I think you've used like a studio magazine photograph, which are really, really bad. What you want to do is, if you're always using, so let's take a look at Portrait Studio real quick. If you're always using this angle right here, this kind of lighting, this is the most boring thing in the universe. This lighting is just terrible. The reason why it's terrible is because, and this photographers like to use this a lot because it's very, very flattering for women. You don't have long shadows. Because it doesn't allow any of the form to really express its elevation, its altitude against another. A cast shadow, what it does is it proves the presence of an object. It proves its presence in the form. It stands in the way of the light, so it gives character to the face. Even if you diffuse it and if you have just like really, really light contrast and the cast shadows aren't as dark, it still looks good. It's a character that we add to the light source to give it an intensity. And the sharpness is a way to add detail to the face. So if you're choosing references that always have this super, super boring, let me bring that ambience down, this super, super boring method here, it's not going to be nice. You're always going to be cautious with your drawing. No cast shadows to be seen. The light source is always going to look like it's from the same angle, and you're never going to teach yourself a massive fundamental that comes with learning cast shadows. Alright, so by the way, the update for Portrait Studio, we had a delay with the models, and then that was fixed really quickly, and then we had a crash. The project completely crashed. So we were ready, the UI was done, everything was ready, and then everything was ready. All we were waiting for were the models. and then the models come in, and we decide to add them back in. Oh, sorry, that's OSC. And the project just crashes completely. OSC, be quiet! Sorry about that. But yeah, the update will come out. I promise you, there will be full bodies. The models are ready. I wish I had the project right now to show you guys, but I've been using screenshots from it for my private sessions just so that students can get a full body reference. And anyone who currently owns it, your update is coming. I promise you. There's just been a massive delay in all kinds of ways this summer. This whole year has been a big poop fest for me, but not really. We released Portrait's video and all that. That was fun. But I promise you the update is coming. It is going to come. It is going to be there. So yes, please try to find references that have beautiful, long cast shadows. I mean, there's a reason why the masters, like the Rembrandt lighting here, that he always chose this one. He was obsessed with this light source situation. He would always raise it at 45-degree angles to the top right or top left, because this is just so beautiful and so flattering. And the form becomes when you have light sources that look like this all the time. Just like this, they're always looking like this. What becomes front and center is the feature, not the form. But when you have a light source that has this a portrait that has this kind of light source in it, the form becomes front and center, not the features. The features come second. The features are not as important. The eyes are very important, yes, in a portrait. But what you're supposed to do first is develop the skeletal geometry. The skeletal geometry casts shadows and an interesting kind of light source. So if you're a photographer who only ever does portraits that look like this, with all they have is makeup on, and it's not going to be very mature photography. It's going to be very immature, undeveloped, skillless, tasteless, and that's going to look the same kind of effect in your art. But if you experiment with those long and, dare I say, unflattering cast shadows, you start to have a different reaction in your work, and your work becomes more mature, and it expresses a more skill, an eye for different kinds of physics and specific it's like a discomfort or a darkness in the image, which is very, very beautiful to look at. Very editorial, not even editorial, it's just very artistic. It's beautiful. And fashion photography is it's ironic, but it's anything but beautiful, to be honest. It's so bleh, it's emotionless, it's cold. So those are my suggestions. This is a landscape done by someone. This is not a landscape because the land is not. We're not scaping across the land. This is a shadow puppet silhouette of some grass and a tree against overly detailed background. And this is a sky background. We're seeing lots of stars, but we're also seeing it's very stylistic. And we're seeing pink clouds against the night sky, which is again not possible. And we're seeing a silhouette, which would probably be the sunset, but even then the stars aren't. And the scatter brush you used is a particle scatter brush. It's actually not. It would be the dust you see in light. It wouldn't really feel like the stars. Stars are more organized. I don't know how to say it. They have more of a specific pattern to them. They have constellations and breathing points and breathing room. Nowhere on this earth, if you stood, you would see this much perfect star exposure. I mean, if you stood in the equator, no light pollution, you looked up, you probably would see a lot of beautiful stars, but you'd have to have your camera exposed for a long time and following the tilt to get this perfect angle and perfect amount of stars. Usually the stars that leave our atmosphere completely see a lot of stars, but our atmosphere hides a lot of the stars. So the telescopes that are floating up in there, the ones that are really high above the oxygen level, usually see more stars, but that's not realistic. So this is a very stylistic shadow puppet. It is not a landscape. A landscape has land. It has visibility. It has a nice bright sun to show off the land. It's got cast shadows. It's got atmospheric fade. It's got it all. So it's usually a camera's pointing down at the land, or at least the camera's on the land. The light source is coming from above. What you have here is a vector or a silhouette kind of stamp or shadow puppet kind of setup concept. Okay, so the way to do that, we really just have to start doing some landscapes. You've silhouetted it out completely because you know, there's no form, and you're kind of afraid to do some form. So do some form studies so that you can get a better, wrap your head around the shape of a mountain, the shape of a tree, and you'll know how to throw core shadows on. This is another example of when muddy colors, when bad things happen to good colors, when bad things happen to good values. Again, the light source seems like it's a really bright lit room coming from an open window, and it's sunlight coming in, but she's got this darkness in her skin and this oversaturation that would not be possible. So I would desaturate first of all. You don't want to force saturation if there isn't enough light to show off the saturation. The light environment you chose is already so dark. So just a lot of factors. And then again, almost no cast shadow. Always so careful. You guys are always so careful with your cast shadows. Again, we all grew up with that magazine thing where magazines tried to avoid cast shadows as much as possible, keeping them small and short and kind of boring. But she would definitely have a cast shadow running off the side of her nose. Right along here. Just like that. And there would be a lot more shadow under her eyes. Just like that. There would be a lot more hidden, and there'd be a cast shadow coming off her hair. She does look evil. She does have that I'm gonna kill the king kind of look in her eyes. And then the yellow of her hair, it wouldn't really be this bright on this side. Only some select hairs that escaped and got into the light. And this area here would probably need some more highlight to it. The yellow of her face and the yellow of her hair aren't matching. Usually when we have pale blonde hair like that, it comes out of pale blonde skin. I know it's weird, but usually the skin matches it. That's how you know when someone's hair isn't really their natural hair color, because their skin tone doesn't look like it comes out of the same palette. So it would be a more pale, more colorless, and you would have really, really cool purples or just like a grayish tone to the skin type, instead of that pink, which comes out of redheads or people with dark brown hair. We usually have more reds in the skin. But I would just throw a little bit of a monochromatic touch to that skin tone. But your values are just really, really dark, so you have to choose, is this a dark setting? Are you going to have this much contrast? Because if we look at the grayscale is really, really dark. It's really muddy. And if I was in a room and it was this dark and she barely had this much light on her, you would not see this much saturation, or the saturation we saw before, which was much more. And I think there would also be a need to make it cooler. Just push it towards the purples and then desaturate even further, just to match that gray kind of Scottish castle landscape weather, and this evil wench witch is about to kill the king of Camelot. Less yellow. There's not enough sunlight, so why would there be so much yellow? So before, we're using daylight saturation in a dark room. You have to desaturate. If there's no light, there's no color. I'm going to desaturate it for you. Actually, you know what? You desaturate it, but I think you should stay to grayscales for a while until you really think about light environment and how dark you should go in certain areas. When you go grayscale, when you paint in grayscale for a while, what happens is that you start to think about the light more, and you don't have to think about the colors so much anymore, because the colors don't change the way the light behaves. They simply don't. It's light is light on form. The form could have different characteristics to it. It could be translucent and need subsurface scattering. It could be really, really textured and would be mattified, so it wouldn't have that much of a specular sparkle back against the light. It could be something really shiny. But all you need is the relationship between the light and the object, and the light and the room and the object. Those three are the light environment. And if you're not thinking about this basic physics, if you haven't introduced them into your vocabulary, when you try to do color again, your colors will look very bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Your colors will suck. And they'll suck because you don't think about the light source. The light source isn't in the first thing in your mind. The first thing in your mind is the portrait, is that magazine, fashion photography kind of mentality with your portraits, which is really, really bad. It leads to a really cold, flat looking form landscape in the portraiture, where you need something that is a little bit more daring, a little bit longer, like longer cast shadows, less about the features and more about the form and the relationship between the light and the face, not as a face label, but the face as a landscape, a geometric landscape. Geometrical, seriously. What I recommend for this is the last one. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but what you're doing is you're shading an entire torso as a combination of like the spine and the bone structure and the bone structure of the spine, the curvature of the spine, the rib cage and the curvature of the rib cage and the geometry of the rib cage, how it's a combination of both a large rectangle and a sphere. The muscle structure, the gesture, the joints, the angle that she might be tilting in. You're summarizing all of that with a simple gradient. It looks like you're shading one big cylinder. This looks like a clay model that's like early stages of the clay model. You haven't thought about all the edges yet. You haven't gotten the tool and kind of just shaved away some of the bits here. Where's the light source coming from? Where is the angle? If we're having shadows down here, then the light source should have been up here somewhere, stopping at the shoulders, just like that, coming from above. Where's light in? Yes, the light should have been coming from above. Should indicate the light's coming from above, and that's causing the cast shadow to go downward. And then this area here, this is where the geometry of the side of the torso starts, so maybe there's some extra bounce light happening on the side over here. And then where is the cast shadow of the torso on itself? So things can cast shadows on themselves. So where is the leftover of that cast shadow? So we probably need an indication there for that cast shadow. How about the geometry? Everything is a cylinder. It's a sausage. It's just sausage. It's a sausage fest. Everything is a cylinder here. Nothing is a geometry. Nothing is cubed. Nothing is. You're not showing me that there are cubes in anything. So where are the lines where we're not blending? The cubes have edges that are not blended together. Why is the entirety of the butt visible in the light? Why is it not only the top half of the butt and the lower half is in shadow? Because the butt is only getting some of the light that's coming from above. Why is the butt outlined? You don't need to outline it. They have layers. So where are the layers that look up at the light? Where are the shadows? So layer the butt cheeks. Don't actually draw them out, similar to the way you guys draw out the cleavage. It's one breast and then a background and another breast. So it's one butt cheek, a background, and then the other butt cheek. So which one comes first? That's the one that gets the gradients and the values. And then the space in between them probably gets no value. It probably gets all the light. So you still have line dependency. So what do you do when you have this many mistakes? You go down, you go back, you go backward. You just go backward completely. Stop trying to paint a full human body. Take it piece by piece. So what does that mean? That means learn where the geometries are in the basic. Learn basic gestures first. Basic, fluid, believable, organic, realistic movement in the gestures, as if it's frame by frame animation. And then after that, learn how to dress those gesture lines with some form. So where is the bone structure that influences and brings in that geometry in the shape of the arm? The arm is a rectangle. It isn't a cylinder as much as you'd like to think. It is a rectangle, and it reacts to the light the way a rectangle does. It is curved on the edges cylindrically, but it's not a cylinder. It's not a big sausage. So you have to Do some form studies. Study the relationship between the light and the form and the background. This is pretty good values, I guess, for the background. Do some studies on anatomy, just learn basic muscle structure. So would the shoulder blades really do that? The arm doesn't feel realistic. Study the arm one day, study one day just on thighs and find the geometry in the thighs. And then one day in the future combine them all together, still in grayscale, and try to create that big form study. So instead, again, you're not painting a body because a body comes with symbols. You have instances of line dependency. Right here you had some outlines over here. You are line dependent. That is the diagnosis. And to fix it, you have to be remove the line completely and replace it with an edge. And to do that, you have to introduce yourself to what a form really is and do some form studies, random lasso. Look at my channel, search form study process, and you'll find that that's my process as well. I just lasso and try out of a silhouette of a basic polygon, try to make it make sense with a light source in mind. There's just a lot ahead of you and you're trying too much too soon. You need to learn some radial shading. Everything is a gradient. Everything is light to dark, light to dark. Nothing builds up. Light, dark to light, light to dark. So radial shading is when you build up your values. You build them up so that it feels like this is a cave. You build up your values so that it feels like it's a pearl. Just like that. So you build things up so they feel like an elevation. Right, this is radial shading. Alright, so I hope that helps you guys out. Thank you all for coming. I'm so sorry about my voice. I've just been really sick, and I'm probably going to stay sick for a while from now. Something that I thought I fixed early on in the year is no longer fixed, and it's back, and I'm back right where I started, and I'm hopefully in the process to fixing this once and for all, but I'm probably going to stay sick for a while, and my videos are probably going to suffer. I'm losing like concentration, and I'm getting muddy like right now, like brain fog, and I kind of lose my concentration somehow, some halfway into the sentence, and I just trail on and I sound like an old person talking. I'm so sorry. Learning in a friendly environment. I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? Let me just see if there's any questions. I love Istebrak's advice. Going back to work on the basics is probably the most helpful tip I've ever received. It's something that I do still, and I'm teaching you guys. So if I'm doing it and I'm the teacher, there's no excuse for you guys not to do it. Basics don't mean simple. Write that back to me. I always make you guys write that back to me, but the basics don't mean simplicity. The basics come with a lot of complications. The basics are the constant anthem that you have to sing every day when you wake up in the morning. That's your anthem. Reread them and read them. Make lists. Post them somewhere on your desk so you remember them. Because the basics are the core foundation of the physics and the believability of this world and the world of your painting. And in order to imitate the beauty that happens in this world between form and light, you have to learn the basics of how they happen, the basic infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, the characteristics of light and the characteristics of the form, and the atmosphere within which they live. You're so strong. I am not strong. I am very weak. Yes. Basics equals the mantra. Yes. So instead of say basics. Yes. So I'll post this up on YouTube. Thank you everyone for coming today. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye. Oh, before I go, this Thursday, if I can make it, if I feel great, Thursday is the final day. This is going to be the day that we look at all of the character design concepts for the Adventure Fellowship. Some stuff looks amazing so far. I really didn't want to show them today because I wanted to leave them for Thursday. They just look wonderful. You guys did an amazing job. You're all going to be such great concept artists one day. One day soon. But anyway, I'll see you guys on Thursday. Bye-bye.